Addis Business Talk with Khalid and Marid on Afro FM 105.3. We'll be talking to policymakers, investors, business leaders, and entrepreneurs to bring you the latest development taking place in the Ethiopian economic and business climate, and more importantly, what it means to you.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening from Addis Ababa, Ethiopia. This is Addis Business Talk with Khalid and Marid every Thursday morning on Afro FM 105.3, the first all-English radio and podcast business show in Ethiopia. My name is Marid Bisrat, along with my co-host Khalid Mawi. Thank you for joining us. The show is brought to you by Pragma Investment Advisory, an investment management and advisory firm based in Addis Ababa, along with our partners, 251 Communications, a very prominent PR and marketing firm also based in Addis Ababa. CIPE is one of the four core institutes of the National Endowment for Democracy and an affiliate of the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. To tell us more about CIPE, who they are, what they do in Ethiopia and in the Horn of Africa, and to talk about the impact of COVID-19 on the private sector, we have invited our guests from Washington, D.C., Lars Benson, CIPE Director for Africa, and Hanan Wetters, Program Officer for Africa at CIPE.
Addis Business Talk.
So let's forward the first question to Lars. Give us a background and introduction about CIPE, what you do, where are you based, and what do you do specifically here in Ethiopia, also in the region in East Africa?
Thank you, Merit. And it's a pleasure to be with you today.
Thanks.
So CIPE has been around for over 35 years, and sort of at that intersection between democracy and economy. And specifically, what role can business play in furthering democratic development around the world? But what does this really mean? It means that we're focusing on democratic values. We focus on issues like anti-corruption. We focus on issues about how does business participate and work with government in terms of policy and regulatory reform. We work on trying to give a voice to marginalized communities. Typically, these are frequently those in the informal sector, but also programs focused on women and youth. We're very much focused on how do you really increase transparency in terms of economic policies or all issues related to economic development and growth. Specifically in Africa, we have offices in Ethiopia and also in Kenya, Nigeria, and opening an office currently in Sudan. I would say our programs across Africa really focus on 6 main areas. We strengthen the business leaders to become really change agents and to participate in dialogue about what needs to happen in terms of, again, going back to economic growth and development, but at the same time, making sure the business has a voice in terms of working with government. We're focused very much, and this is becoming ever more important, on how do you utilize trade to improve participation of the business community and address some of the issues around inequality. We're trying to find new ways to expand economic opportunity and rights through the digital economy. And we are helping businesses adopt ethical business practices so that we can reduce corruption across the continent. And finally, we're supporting business-led efforts for peace and reducing conflict. And this is becoming an ever larger part of our programs in Ethiopia. And I would say the most important part is how do you engage in public-private dialogue at the local level, at the regional level, and at the national level. We have a series of programs that do this in many, many countries, and including one where we've been working for many years in Ethiopia about trying to get business to get more involved in providing solutions to challenges facing their local communities. And I think I'll hand this to Hannah to talk a little bit about our programs in Ethiopia.
Thanks, Lars. So I think you did a great job of giving a broad overview of CIPE in Africa. Specifically in Ethiopia, CIPE is really invested in its public-private dialogue programming, and we work really hard to support partners, including chambers of commerce and business associations across the country to engage government at the regional and national level in public-private dialogue. Another part of our programming in Ethiopia is actually what we're calling the CIPE Civic Engagement Hub, which is a new initiative. But if you go to our office in Bole, we have a co-working space and resource center that is designed specifically to support civil society organizations and social entrepreneurs and some startups who are interested in engaging in civic participation. So we are currently building out that resource center and incubator to help grow these new types of civic organizations in Ethiopia. And then finally, I wanted to highlight another new facet of our work, which is around digital economy. This is actually a joint project between Ethiopia and Kenya, where we're really taking a hard look at what it means for a digital economy to be inclusive. In Ethiopia, we're looking specifically at how can SMEs benefit more from some of the policy advances that are currently being made in Ethiopia around the digital economy, and how can we help inform both businesses and government about the opportunities to participate in this space.
Great. Thank you very much, Lars and Hannah, for that elaborate answer. Moving to the elephant in the room, next question would be, how would you say the private sector should mitigate the impact of COVID-19 and how the private sector should adapt to the changing business environment due to this very pandemic?
Thank you. That's a really good question, and I think it's one that governments and businesses around the world are challenged currently in terms of trying to find the solution. Look, I think it comes down to this. Ethiopia as a country has had economic growth and had one of the highest economic growths in the world. And this was over almost 7 years of constant growth. The pandemic has clearly left and impacted the economy and really scarred the community, both from the health implications, but as well when we start talking about the number of people that are facing extreme poverty. And it has, in addition to all of that, disrupted the traditional supply chains around the world. So when we start taking a look at how to reopen economies, and it's still undetermined whether right now we're in that phase or we're still dealing with the immediate effects of the pandemic, I think we need to go back and start talking about really the root causes of economic growth. And when we start talking about that, we're talking about what can the government do in terms of creating opportunities, in terms of modifying taxes, of increasing government spending now during the pandemic to try to alleviate some of the health concerns. How can the government go through a process of lowering interest rates? These are huge challenges, and especially in Ethiopia, where we've been faced with a series of crises before the pandemic, but it's becoming even more challenging. And it's going to issues in terms of what is the government's capacity for spending, how has the government responded to the health pandemic? You're also talking about the issues of foreign currency and devaluation of the birr. And so when we start taking a look at what is going to be needed, the government won't be able to do it alone, and it will need to work in conjunction with businesses, but specifically those groups, which are chambers and associations representing the business sector, to address some of the immediate challenges in terms of how can we increase agricultural production again for Ethiopia, how can we create a bigger export economy for Ethiopia, how can we employ people who have been now unemployed. And these are not things that the government can solve alone. So the business community and how do we spur domestic and foreign investment are going to become ever more critical. The pandemic has also created opportunities. So Ethiopia, like many other countries, is in a position to assess what was worked in the past, but also to begin to try to change and find ways to bring back not only spending from the diaspora in terms of investment, but how to attract other types of businesses from around the world, because we know that Ethiopia as an economic hub for Africa and for East Africa is critically important. And so I would conclude on there isn't one solution. I think what needs to be done is more dialogue between the government and the business community in terms of addressing immediate crises as they arise and trying to find joint solutions in terms of, as it might be policy or regulatory, but also as it might be in terms of how can we galvanize the private sector to really contribute to Ethiopia's longer economic growth. Thank you.
Well, definitely great points raised there, Lars, and thank you very much for that. Well, that unfortunately wraps up our segment. Lars Benson, Regional Director for Africa at the Center for International Private Enterprise, or CIPE, and Hannah Wetters, Program Officer for Africa at CIPE as well. Thank you very much for joining us on Addis Business Talk.
Thank you, Khalid. Thank you, Merit.
Thank you, everyone.
Addis Business Talk.